Good evening from the State of Kuwait. Welcome to the 7 o'clock news for Saturday, the 20th of September 2014. I am Dalia Badran with the headlines for tonight. His Highness the Emir's representative Sheikh Jaber al-Mbarak al-Hamad al-Sabah, the Prime Minister, arrives in New York to participate in the 69th session of the UN General Assembly. U.S. Secretary of State chairs UN Security Council meeting to build support for Iraq's new government and fight the IS militants. Turkey says more than 45,000 Syrians have crossed the border in 24 hours, fearing the IS attacks. Sectarian violence in Yemen continues for the third day, bringing the death toll in Sana'a to at least 120 people. Hello and welcome. His Highness the Emir Sheikh Sabah al-Ahmed al-Jaber al-Sabah's representative, His Highness the Prime Minister Sheikh Jaber al-Mbarak al-Hamad al-Sabah, and the delegation accompanying him arrived in New York today evening to participate in the 69th session of the UN General Assembly, the UNGA, and UN Climate Summit. His Highness Sheikh Jaber al-Mbarak was received at John F. Kennedy Airport by Kuwait Ambassador to the U.S., Sheikh Salim al-Abdallah al-Jaber al-Sabah, embassy members, and Kuwait permanent representative to the UN, Ambassador Mansour al-Ataibi. In a statement shortly after his arrival, His Highness the Emir, the Prime Minister, said he was honored to represent His Highness the Emir to head Kuwait's delegation to the UNGA's 69th session, which he described as very important, as it would be attended by the heads of states and governments of some 130 countries. He said the 69th session would be held amidst regional and international challenges, which required a solid international cooperation to deal with. His Highness Sheikh Jaber al-Mbarak hoped the international community would fully cooperate with the UN and its agencies in the fight against terrorism, which has become a growing threat that cannot be ignored. Kuwait, he added, was keen on cooperating with the UN and its agencies to boosting international security and stability, as well as contributing actively to the UN's humanitarian endeavors with the aim of addressing crises in some countries. His Highness the Prime Minister said Kuwait would continue its cooperation with the UN to help countries affected by the disasters. He lauded the UN and its Secretary General Ban Ki-moon for the honoring of His Highness the Emir as a humanitarian leader and naming the State of Kuwait as a humanitarian center. His Highness the Prime Minister is accompanied by the First Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Sheikh Sabah al-Khalid al-Hamad al-Sabah, and Minister of Oil and Minister of State of Parliament Affairs Dr. Ali al-Umair. The Kuwait Red Crescent Society chairman, Dr. Hilal al-Sayer, said today that the KRCS will send a humanitarian convoy to Gaza next Tuesday with aid, medications, foodstuffs, and school bags. The convoy includes 22 trucks carrying up to 400 tons of foodstuffs, 162 tons of medical supplies, and 5,000 school bags for the Palestinians in the Strip. Several volunteers will accompany the convoy to Rafah crossing in Egypt, then into Gaza to distribute the aid for the people there in cooperation with the Gaza Health Ministry, the Palestinian Red Crescent. Al-Sayer noted that the society was keen to buy part of the supplies from the Egyptian market to 20,000 food baskets, 5,000 school bags, and medications worth $1 million. The supplies have been provided to the victims of the Israeli attacks. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry brought together 35 countries at the UN Security Council on Friday to build support for Iraq's new government and the campaign to confront the IS militants. Chairing a meeting of the United Nations Security Council, Kerry said the coalition to eliminate the IS was not only military in nature, adding it is about taking out an entire network, decimating and discrediting a militant cult masked as a religious movement. Kerry also praised the Iraqi Kurdish Peshmerga forces, who he described as being absolutely critical in the fight against the IS. The council adopted a statement condemning the IS militants and expressing support for the new Iraqi government of Prime Minister Haider al-Abadi. French jets struck a suspected IS target for the first time on Friday, expanding a U.S.-led military campaign against militants who have seized a third of the country and also control large parts of neighboring countries. President Francois Hollande said Rafale jets hit a logistics depot of the terrorists near the city of Mosul, which has been held by the IS for more than 3 months, adding that more operations in coming days. The French military action, which follows U.S. airstrikes in northern and near the capital Baghdad, involved 2 Rafale fighter jets, a supply plane, and a Navy reconnaissance plane. A spokesman for French defense minister said 4 airstrikes were carried out in the space of half an hour, destroying a storage facility containing vehicles, arms, and fuel. Some 45,000 mainly Syrian Kurds have crossed into Turkey in the past 24 hours as the IS militants advance in northern Syria. Turkey opened its border on Friday to Syrians who had fled the Kurdish border town known as Ain al-Arab in fear of an IS attack. Turkey Deputy Prime Minister confirmed today that 45,000 refugees had crossed the border within a 24-hour period. Activists say some 300 Kurdish fighters have crossed into Syria from Turkey to help defeat the strategic town. Turkey, which shares a border with Iraq and Syria, has taken in since the uprising against al-Assad began 3 years ago. Turkish Prime Minister Ahmed Davutoglu said dozens of Turkish hostages seized by the IS militants in Iraq 3 months ago were freed and safely returned to Turkey today. The 49 hostages were captured from the Turkish consulate in Mosul on the 11th of June when militants captured the city during its takeover of large swathes of Iraq and Syria. Turkey's Deputy Prime Minister said the hostages were all Turkish consulate employees, 46 Turks and 3 local Iraqis. The group was greeted by flag-waving crowds in Ankara after arriving there early today. Turkey has come under pressure from Western countries to stem the flow of foreign fighters joining the IS. Yemen's government troops have been battling the Houthi rebels for a 3rd day in the capital Sana'a after the UN has failed to mediate a peace deal between the warring sides. Explosions were heard today near the Interior Ministry in the northern part of Sana'a, a day after the fighters began shelling the state television building as they advanced into the city. Thousands of Houthis have been staging protests in Sana'a for more than a month, besieging ministries and blocking the road to the main airport. Clashes also erupted in the south. When the armies tried to prevent Houthis from entering the city, 3 rebels were killed and 2 troops were wounded. At least 123 fighters have been killed since the violence began on Thursday. The first full round of nuclear talks between Iran and 6 world powers resumed in New York after a 2-month gap, with Western officials saying the coming days are critical to reaching a deal by the November 24th deadline. The talks are taking place to the backdrop of the annual United Nations General Assembly meeting, meaning leaders and foreign ministers from Iran and the six powers will be in town. The details in the following report.
With little more than 2 months to the deadline, Iran and six world powers launched a fresh effort at narrowing stubborn differences on what nuclear concessions Tehran must agree to in exchange for full sanctions relief. The talk once again bring Iran to the negotiating table with the United States, Russia, China, Britain, France and Germany, but this time they took place on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly, meaning that leaders and foreign ministers from Iran and the six powers will be in town. As the two sides missed a July 20th target date for a final deal and bilateral summer talks between Iran and the US made scant progress, the deadline was extended to November the 24th. Ahead of the talks, Chief US Negotiator Wendy Sherman acknowledged that sides remain far apart on the size and scope of Iran's uranium enrichment capacity. She said that Tehran's demands to be allowed to keep its program at its present size and output are not acceptable and will not give Iran what it wants. According to a UN nuclear watchdog report published yesterday, Iran is taking further action to comply with the terms of an extended interim agreement with the six world powers over its disputed atomic activities. The document of the International Atomic Energy Agency made clear that Iran is continuing to meet its commitments under the preliminary accord that it reached with the world powers last year and that took effect in January. It added that Tehran is using some of its higher grade enriched uranium in oxide form to produce fuel, a step that experts say would make it more difficult to use the material for any bombs. Iran denies Western allegations that it is working to develop a capability to make atomic bombs, saying that it is refining uranium to fuel a planned network of nuclear power plants. During his visit to New York, Iranian Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif questioned the sanctions against Iran as effective in pressuring his country on its nuclear program. According to officials, the talk started with a brief meeting of top negotiators from Iran and the P5+1 at the UN. There will be a mix of bilateral and multilateral meetings in coming days at expert and senior official levels. They added that US President Barack Obama is open to meeting with Iranian President Hassan Rouhani, but nothing is yet planned.
Ukraine's government and pro-Russia rebels have agreed a memorandum on a peace plan for the eastern conflict. The 9-point deal includes setting up a 30-kilometer buffer zone, a ban on overflights of parts of eastern Ukraine by military aircraft, and the withdrawal of armed forces on both sides. The agreement was announced at talks in the Belarusian capital of Minsk, where a ceasefire was agreed on the 5th of September. In a separate development today, 3 powerful blasts rocked the main rebel-held city of Donetsk, with eyewitnesses saying that a chemical plant may have been hit. Meanwhile, a humanitarian convoy of about 200 lorries from Russia arrived in the city. Former Prime Minister Gordon Brown told British leaders today that they must honor their promise to grant further powers to Scotland after voters backed staying in the United Kingdom in an independence referendum. Brown said it was time to move from the battleground to the common ground after a majority in Scotland voted no to leaving the UK. During the campaign, Prime Minister David Cameron, Labour leader Ed Miliband and Liberal Democrat leader Nick Clegg promised to guarantee Scotland high levels of state funding and grant Scots greater control over healthcare spending. After Scots rejected independence, Cameron said the issue of Scottish independence had been settled for a generation, but pledged a swift constitutional shake-up for all parts of the United Kingdom. In New Zealand, opposition leader David Cunliffe has conceded defeat in New Zealand's elections, acknowledging that current Prime Minister John Key has won a third term in office. According to the National Electoral Commission, the National Party is projected to win 61 seats in the 120-member parliament. With nearly 100% of the votes counted, Prime Minister John Key's party held 48%, with the opposition Labour Party lagging behind on 25%. Supporters say Key and his colleagues have managed the economy well during 6 years in office, as the economy this year has been growing at 4%, while unemployment has dropped to 5.6%. And finally tonight, a 3-day curfew is underway in Sierra Leone to let health workers find and isolate cases of Ebola in order to halt the spread of the disease. Many people have been reluctant to seek medical treatment for Ebola, as a team of 30,000 people is going house to house to find those infected and distribute soap. Meanwhile, in neighboring Guinea, the bodies of 8 missing health workers and journalists involved in the Ebola campaign have been found. Earlier, United Nations reaffirmed its commitment to contain the Ebola outbreak and combat the rapidly accelerating disease. The meeting came a day after the UN Security Council unanimously adopted a resolution urging all countries to provide health experts, field hospitals, and medical supplies to contain the disease. In addition, UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon announced that the UN's new force to fight Ebola, the UN Mission for Ebola Emergency Response, will be headquartered in Accra, Ghana, and will have offices in Liberia, Guinea, and Sierra Leone. For a chance to see our reports again, please visit our YouTube channel at MOI Kuwait News. Before we end, here is a quick reminder of today's headlines. His Highness the Emir's representative, Sheikh Jaber al-Mbarak al-Hamad al-Sabah, the Prime Minister, arrives in New York to participate in the 69th session of the UN General Assembly. U.S. Secretary of State chairs UN Security Council meeting to build support for Iraq's new government and fight the IS militants. Turkey says more than 45,000 Syrians have crossed the border in 24 hours, fearing the IS attacks. Sectarian violence in Yemen continues for the 3rd day, bringing the death toll in Sana'a to at least 120 people.